fact that we're one of the last or kind of second last panels. So I know we're in between everyone getting to the parties. But I think we're going to have a really good conversation here about the metaverse, because we've got a great panel here to kind of get into the weeds on the realistic applications of the metaverse. I mean, it's been a kind of a buzzword the last 2 or 3 years, and a lot of different, people that love it, people that don't love it so much. So we're going to try and get into figuring that all out here. When we were talking off stage, there was a point about the kind of media coverage of the metaverse, and some of it being very critical of the metaverse, and saying it hasn't quite delivered on all the big promises that it made a year or so ago. I recall one piece, the headline was just straight up, "Is the metaverse dead?" So I'm going to just put that question to all of you here. Well, how do you respond to those kind of criticism? I'll start with you, Emma, on the kind of critiques of the metaverse that we've seen.
Well, I think that we probably started by overselling the metaverse. I remember when Magic Leap advertising commercials came out, and they were amazing. You can see an elephant in your hand, and the whale was jumping. And I think that that is the problem, that we're selling a vision that isn't real yet. And the metaverse as a concept is a futuristic concept. So we're getting there, but it's not there yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Brian, you're with Accenture. You're the global lead on innovation and metaverse. So you're dealing with clients regularly on this. Can you just tell us a little bit about what their expectations were, say, a year or two ago versus what their expectations are now, and how you kind of temper that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think it's a great place to start. Actually, I think we need to address that elephant in the room, because even if you do a Google News search on metaverse, you're just going to see a lot of negative sentiment around it. I think the journey, I suppose, a lot of large organizations have been on is really one of learning and exploration and understanding. So I think last year there was a lot of education around actually what is this, technology, even though much of it has existed for many years, if we're talking about virtual reality or immersive worlds, but really an understanding of what it is and then how it can be applied. And I think that's where it's got more interesting, arguably, this year, kind of almost since the bubble has burst, because now we're moving into real application of the technology. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And real use case.
And Jason, can you tell us a little bit about Zavatar, first of all, because you're doing a lot of very interesting stuff in kind of the entertainment, animation space. Can you just tell us quickly a little bit about Zavatar?
So Zavatar initially was a company that was focused on video communications. So we created real-time reactionary avatars. And for us, as my team, my partners, we all are content creators, filmmakers, music producers. And here we are trying to imagine what would really work for the end user. And we're seeing like NVIDIA doing amazing thing with avatars. It looks so realistic, but I think that approach is a little freaky, to be honest, because we're dealing in an unreal environment. It's not a real physical. So why would you want to be you? So our approach was very much a comic book or superhero cartoon version of yourself, a 2D version living within a 3D environment. Mm-hmm. And then early on, we realized after we were developing the technology that we were doing real-time animation. And so we started doing Web3 animation for documentaries and TV shows, and developed our own show, which we're calling The Art of Movie Music. So it's kind of like a late-night talk show, variety show. We interview top-name celebrities. We just were actually at the Cannes Film Festival with David Lynch, Elvis Costello, Donovan, Redman, George Clinton, and talking about how music impacts a film. And I think it's a dialogue that most of us can connect with, because we all can hear a song and it brings back emotion. It's almost a universal conversation. But at the same time, it's all animated. So as these celebrities are telling us their memories, like Elvis was talking about, Mr. Costello was talking about his remake of She in Notting Hill. And was evoking these memories about how the producer was telling them what they wanted, and him going in the studio and making what fits a scene. So all of that would be recreated in animated form, and then that becomes an explorable metaverse, which we're calling the Zataverse. So we're taking a very much an entertainment approach, where my colleagues here, Emma and Brian, are doing incredible work in different fields. We're doing very much what I think what Emma was saying earlier about the metaverse is we saw these amazing visuals and we had such high expectations, and then there was a leader out there dumping billions of dollars and renaming their brand to be called, try to own the metaverse space. And really, if you went into that environment, it was very subpar. The visuals weren't very cool, the experiences were limited, and I think this was kind of like the death in press and for fundraising of the metaverse, because people weren't engaging, they had no reason to continue to come back. And so I think we're approaching that with a solution that will have people more involved with entertainment, with their heroes in film and TV and music, and give people a reason to keep visiting the metaverse.
Okay. So we kind of got three very kind of different applications of metaverse, from the entertainment, Accenture dealing with a lot of enterprise clients, and you touched on manufacturing as well in our discussion earlier on. And then you're in the Warpin is in the kind of training education side of it. So how do you kind of go about discovering that kind of niche application for the metaverse? Maybe starting with Warpin, how did you kind of identify that education training was like the place for the metaverse that you could make a difference in?
Well, I think that it was the nature of the technology itself. You're 3.75 times more emotional connected to the content that you're experiencing in a headset. And also, the way that humans learn is through different senses, right? So if we can engage more senses when learning, of course, we learn faster and we have a retention that is much better. So early studies show that you can save up to 80% of your training and education cost. You have a 70% retention, and you can reduce work-related injuries with up to 45%, because you can also train your muscle memory. So a lot of our clients are now reaping the benefits of having the return on investment on the technologies now, but they're also learning their organization from inside out perspective, using the technology, the future technology communication tools, and having that innovation power from inside the company instead. So, for example, we have a client, the Swedish Postal Service, which isn't known for their innovation, but since they have started to use virtual reality in their own company, their innovation has just skyrocketed.
And Brian, just with the kind of clients and Accenture is dealing with, just give us a bit of a flavor of the kind of industries that are, I guess, the most forward-thinking when it comes to picking up on the metaverse, and they're making investments in this space.
Sure thing. And just to comment on Emma's views, I think the data and the science behind the effectiveness of these technologies, particularly for learning, is just really, really compelling and really powerful. And what really brought it home to me was, and you asked about clients, and this is a public credential, so I can talk about it, but we did work for a US government department, actually, of child protection services. And what we created was actually a replication of a home where a child protection officer has to go in and speak to parents around the care of that child. Very difficult conversation, very difficult environment where you're saying, actually, do we need to remove the child from this home? How do you prepare somebody for doing something like that? And this kind of immersive learning experience, it really feels like you're there and you're speaking to kind of a threatening father. It really, really brought it home to me, the power of this. In terms of the client base, I mean, it's such a broad topic. I mean, we do a lot of learning and training with clients. Industrial metaverse, you mentioned, if you think about automobile manufacturers, aircraft manufacturers, they're really building now digital twins of all of their industrial operations. And again, we're seeing some of the similar type of uplift in efficiency, pre-building actually a factory in advance in the metaverse to understand, is this production line running at optimum efficiency, putting in the real-time data flows into that. Semiconductor industry is a massively growing industry now in the US. There's billions being invested by US government to onshore that industry. Likewise in Europe, it's a big strategic investment to bring semiconductor manufacturing back onshore. These fabrication facilities take many, many years to build. There's hundreds of employees that need to be trained up inside of these environments. So what we are actually doing is beginning to build digital twins of these to actually train up the employees before they hit the floor so they're ready to go and operationalize. And also, again, looking at, as we put more sensors and data across these factories, real-time operations, a view. I think business started, in management and leadership looking at Excel charts, then it was Power BI dashboards. The next version of that is actually a real-time digital twin view of your business operations that you're seeing in an environment where you can explore everything digitally and then, of course, preempt and predict at downtime, these types of things that can be very costly for businesses.
Okay. I just want to remind the audience that we will have a few minutes for Q&A at the end. You've had, in the app, you can pop a few questions in there and we'll try and get to a few at the end. Jason, you alluded to Meta and Mark Zuckerberg there. I'm curious to know what that effect has had on the industry, the metaverse industry in general, in that, like, obviously it's a massive company, but has maybe the Facebook brand been to the detriment of the metaverse in one sense? What's your take on that?
So if you ask my board, they'd be very upset. If you ask me, I think it's fantastic because he's kind of cleared the playing field for us to launch something that's innovated and done correctly. I think the first mistake that Meta did was to invest in their energy into Oculus, because you don't have to have a headset. Now, for these other industries, it's probably very important to have that fully immersive situation. In education, if you're building factories and things, you need to know what's going on. But when it comes to entertainment, we're all very used to Web 2. We're all very used to watching something on a screen, playing a video game, watching a film, whatever it is. So our approach is what we call Web 2.5. If you want to invest and get yourself a headset, which at the moment, I think the headset's a big problem. Apple's going to come out with something in a few months. It's going to change the game. But right now, you feel blind, you feel vulnerable, and you look a bit crazy moving around, with nothing around you to the outsider. So I think that whole perspective, most of us normal people are like, we're not ready for that yet. But if you can actually participate in the Web3 elements, and do it like you would, for me, when I was growing up playing Atari or Nintendo, or anyone having that film, big screen experience. And then once they get comfortable and they're inside, they're like, oh my God, this is great. I can watch movies, I can play video games, I can do this, I can do that. Then they might take that next step and invest in the headset and have that fully 3D experience. So I think that was Meta's biggest mistake right there. Second, their visuals are just subpar. When you step into the Zetaverse, it looks like you are in an animated Hollywood blockbuster film or a top-tier PlayStation game, and this is what people expect. They don't want to be, bobbleheads with a half a floating body. They don't want to be Lego looking. They want something that looks really flash and cool. And so I think as content creators, we understand how to make animation, how to make something that's exciting and visually pleasing. So I think that was his second mistake. And I always think that before you go to market, you should probably know that you can actually deliver. I think that was his third mistake.
I think that's an interesting point about the headsets, that there's this big association with the big goggles to take part in the metaverse. When it comes to building your own solutions, perhaps you can tell me a little bit about this. Like, how much does the kind of hardware side of it factor into the decisions that these companies make? They're going, well, I've got to invest in hardware. I mean, how do you kind of allay those kind of concerns?
Well, for us, we do it as a service. So you either rent headsets through a third party or you buy them, depending on. But also depending on what type of interactions you want in your education and training. So if you need two hands or if you need one hand or what type of advancements you need. The majority of companies doesn't need a Vario headset when training, but in design processes you do. So I think that the headset is, to Jason's point, isn't there yet. Apple is probably going to release something that takes us one step further. But, we are working with all the different headsets at the moment.
Okay. Brian, you were actually telling me earlier about a solution that you built at Accenture for kind of customer service or kind of at the retail setting. Can you tell us a little bit about that? It's sort of like you're dealing with a customer service agent, but it's a bit more kind of, you kind of see them in the store. Can you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Sure, absolutely. And again, it relates to this headset point, because we shouldn't limit ourselves. I mean, so much of it, and it's been driven by the sort of marketing campaigns. Typically, when you hear Metaverse or you read an article, first thing you see is a headset. But to your point, it's much, much broader. It really limits ourselves if we think of it only through a headset. probably about 19 million headsets sold this year, and there's over 5 billion smartphones in the world. So the mass market appeal, and particularly outside of Europe and North America, we need to think about these solutions working on 2D screens as well. In terms of the kind of sales and service solution, we've invested in a company called TouchCast, and it's really interesting technology, because if you think about the retail experience today, it tends to be quite binary. You have an online e-commerce store option, or you go physically in store, and it's a totally different experience. The online is nice because it's efficient, and you can do it from your home and sitting on your couch. The in-store experience is typically good because you actually get to speak to a human and talk to them about the product or services. What we've been thinking about is actually, how do we, blur the lines between the difference in those physical and digital experiences, bring the efficiency of the digital experience with the experience of the physical experience together? And that's essentially what this solution does. So it has a human agent who's just sitting in front of a webcam, no special technology, but they're immersed in a virtual store. So again, if you're the customer, you typically join the session on your phone, on your laptop, in your VR device, and it's just using a browser, and you experience this 3D store. They can talk you through the products, the services, and again, that's a retail example. It could be in banking, it could be financial advisor. You want to speak to a wealth manager, and they're talking about your portfolio. Again, they're in this immersive world, and they can bring up real-time products, data, information to you. So you really get that human experience, but it's a much more immersive way versus just a Teams call or a Zoom call with an agent or advisor, and they can bring in products in real time into that experience.
So cool, Brian. Very cool.
We're starting to get a few questions in here, so I'll start throwing a few out. One is for Emma here. What are the innovations that you mentioned in the Swedish Post Office? Can you tell us a little more about that?
So the Swedish Postal Service is using virtual reality for training, first and foremost. And what they're using it for is everything from leadership training to having difficult conversations and to see how that feels, to situation trainings. Sometimes it can take a whole year or longer to get in different situations when you know how to handle certain things. So they have built on from doing safety controls to truck driving to everything around it. And what they can do is that they can offer the right type of training 24/7 everywhere, regardless of when they're working or not.
Okay. And a question here for, I'll just throw out whoever wants to jump in first. Do you see NFTs as an accelerator or inhibitor for mainstream adoption of the metaverse? Who wants to take that one?
So I'll jump in on that one, actually, because a lot of what we're doing still includes NFTs. I think NFTs are brilliant. I love the blockchain technology. Again, I don't think they've been utilized correctly. And going to Brian's point, this is something that we've been trying to blur the line between physical and digital. And I think this is, where NFTs really need those utilities, where you get something that's not just a JPEG that you can show people on your phone, but actually have more of an immersive experience, but also something in real life. So, for example, one of the great examples my partner loves to use, we interviewed Steve Vai recently for our show. Steve Vai is one of the great guitar players in the world, and has created this Vai sound. And it's done through his instruments, through his studio. So as he's explaining this process through us in the interview, we see the studio being animated, we see the guitars on the wall, and then you, as a punter, can go in as your avatar, pick up an NFT guitar, pick up an NFT bass, someone else that you might not know jumps behind the drums, someone's on keys, and all of a sudden you're making music with people you don't or do know, which is, I think, a social connectivity touch point, which is really exciting. But you also walk away with this NFT, and then maybe there's this one-on-one Zoom with Steve Vai, or you get access to backstage passes or an experience at one of his concerts. So this is what we're trying to build in, and Brian, I'm talking to you after this about our retail stuff, because you're genius. This is really an important thing, that we can't forget the physical side of life. This is to me, Web3 and the metaverse is to enhance your home life, your online life, but we can't disconnect the two. And I think that's been a real stumbling point in some of our competitors or some of the leaders.
I think and maybe just to build on Jason's point, so I totally agree with everything he said. And I think ultimately for this to truly sort of scale, we need to solve for the kind of standards. So in the same way that the Web 2 is standards today, I think this is evolving and it's emerging, and there's lots of organizations working on these right now. But we needed to get it to a point where I buy the NFT of Steve Vai's guitar and I can take it with me across all of the Web3 internet, all of the platforms. And I think that's when it becomes sort of super compelling and powerful.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One of the major talking points today and yesterday has been AI, which has kind of dominated the conversation for a lot of people. Whereas maybe we're not talking about the metaverse as much compared to AI. I'm kind of curious, this is maybe more for you, Brian, considering the kind of clients you're dealing with. Is metaverse kind of competing with AI now for these kind of enterprise investments that companies want to invest in? Were companies that were interested in metaverse a year or two ago now saying, well, actually, I want to invest in AI now? Can you talk to me about that?
I actually think they're very complementary technologies, and they support each other. So we talk about metaverse in Accenture as a continuum because we see it as a continuum of technologies. So it's not something that just was invented or created last year, and it's not something, we are relatively early on this continuum, but companies and the smart companies, and we've just heard kind of examples, are investing today. So that's sort of continuing. Perhaps it's not being picked up in the media as much. I think where AI and metaverse really come together is around the creation of these experiences and worlds. And when we think about GPT-4 and its capabilities, actually, it will really democratize creation of these. Because today, you need to be a Unity developer or an Unreal developer to sort of create many of these spaces and experiences. But if you can actually, just in plain English, create these worlds and design experiences, that will change the game around sales, service, interaction, employee engagement, and massively reduce the cost of deploying these technologies.
Mm-hmm. I think we just time just kind of wrap up with a few last questions from the audience. There's one, I think this kind of gets to the heart of the discussion in general. Do you think we will fully immerse ourselves in virtual reality for work, entertainment, etc., for the full duration of activities, or will it be a tool used to enhance work or entertainment? I think this kind of gets to the question of, I don't want to be in the metaverse all the time, only part of the time. Where's the sweet spot?
How much time we're spending in the metaverse. I think that we're spending a lot of time online today. I think the general is 7 to 8 hours per day. I think these technology, we have a short window of opportunity to really have a look at what we're spending time on. For myself, at least, when I go into a 3D environment, scrolling TikTok or Instagram isn't as fun as before. So my hope is also that we can use these technologies to kind of give us more time in the real life and to spend more time doing real things, but to kind of cut time and do things in a much more efficient way and a much more fun way. And I'm also thinking about, we're always talking about children and we're talking about elderly, how much these technology can help those groups as well. So we have a lot of things that we've just scraped or starting to touch upon, but we haven't really seen the bigger picture of it yet. When people are talking about the metaverse, we're basically talking about new technologies developing for the first time, reaching maturity. And what's really interesting is when we started to combine those different technologies, because now we're working so much in silos. Artificial intelligence, and then we have 3D rendering, and we have digital twins. We have all of these differences, but when we put them together, that's when we're going to have the real benefits for humanity, I think.
That kind of gets to the similar point you were making there, Brian, about how it all kind of come together complementary rather than thinking about it in, as you say, in silos.
Exactly, 100% agree with what Emma was saying. I think, naturally, this will just become the next version of the internet ultimately at a certain point. So we won't see it as, well, I'm now spending time in the metaverse and I'm now spending time not in the metaverse. It will all sort of fundamentally blur together. There's a lot of development work that needs to be done to get us there. There's a lot of standards that need to be developed. But I think we're seeing that the pioneers or the businesses that are investing today, and I think your example of the Swedish Post is a really good example, are the ones that are, ready to capitalize on that. And actually, what we're seeing as well, and I work a lot with telecommunications companies, the companies that are investing right now, they begin to transition their entire business model, because it's not just around how I can run my business better, faster, cheaper. It's actually how can I reinvent my product and how I serve my customers and my clients, and actually what I bring to market. So I think the smart companies are investing in that now to build sort of the next generation of services.
Okay, great. I just see we're just about out of time, so I think we'll wrap it up there. So thanks very much. Thanks for joining us.